Okay, good morning, everybody. We're obviously here on a solemn event involving the fatal shooting of Mr. Bain by Lancaster City Police Department, and I'm here to address my conclusions based on all the evidence. I've been provided with all the reports from the police. I've been provided with all the physical evidence. There's a number of videos which will be shown to you this morning, as well as some photographic evidence. Took some time with this case because it's obviously very important to make sure that I went through everything in great detail, and the police have answered the questions that I had. Just a preliminary comment. I typically have the conferences in this room. It is a court room, and there may be an event at 9:30. I'll do what I can to get through this. If we have to move to my offices, we'll move to my offices, and we'll continue it. I will stay till the media's questions are answered on it. So we might have a little bit of break. I just let you know in advance. The first thing that I want to go over is in essence the law. And remember that my review is a legal review. Were the laws of Pennsylvania complied with? Was the shooting justified under Pennsylvania law? And it's really based essentially on common sense. I will provide a written report that includes all the specific laws to the media at the conclusion of this, but I'll just paraphrase the relevant parts that are here for consideration. There's essentially, a broader Fourth Amendment constitutional standard which looks at, the severity of the crime at issue, whether the suspect posed an immediate threat, the safety of the officers or others, and whether the suspect is actively resisting or attempting to evade arrest by flight. And that's the broader scope. And then you have the Pennsylvania statutes that involve use of force in self-protection, use of force by a police officer, and then there are special categories for defense of others and also use of deadly force. And all those are what I'm going to apply the facts to this morning. Section 508, and I'll just read this so I don't miss anything, about police officers' use of force in making an arrest. A police officer or any person who is summoned or directed to assist him need not retreat or desist from efforts to make a lawful arrest because of the resistance or threatened resistance to the arrest. He is justified in the use of any force which he believes to be necessary to effect the arrest, and of any force which he believes to be necessary to defend himself or another from bodily harm while making the arrest. Now, deadly force. If he is justified in using deadly force only when he believes that such force is necessary to prevent the death or serious bodily injury of himself or another person. So that's the first category that allows an officer to use deadly force. There's a second option for them as well, which would provide justification. So he's justified in using deadly force if he believes when both that one, such force is necessary to prevent the arrest from being defeated by resistance or escape, and two, and it's either or here, there's two options for two, the person to be arrested has committed or attempted a forcible felony, or is attempting to escape and possesses a deadly weapon, or otherwise indicates that he will endanger human life or inflict serious bodily injury unless arrested without delay. So that's the thing that I'm keeping in mind while I'm looking at the facts of this case. So there's the aspect of protection of yourself or protection of others, and then there's the other aspect of, does it apply? Was a forcible felony, did a forcible felony take place, and do they need to do this to prevent escape? And then you have those options between the forcible felony and also whether there's a danger to the other and he has a deadly weapon. So that's the backdrop of the legal analysis that I'm looking at while I look through this. This is just a overhead view of, maybe if you could just hold that up, just to orient you. There's a number of can you back up? There's a number of witnesses that we have in addition to the video evidence and in addition to the statements from the police officers. And in essence, this crime takes place in all along North Queen Street, up and down here, starting up in this area and in an alcove, which you'll see, and you'll see the videos. But I want orient you to a number of witnesses who I'll be using letter names to identify them. First of all, there's witness A, which is the operator at the Lancaster Community Safety Coalition video, who actually initiates this call. And so he's not present at the scene, obviously, but operating the video. There's witness B, who's in the basically sitting in the under the roof, approximately here, who's more of an ear witness to the initial encounter, sees some of it, hears most of it, and talks to the police. As I go through the facts, you'll hear that Mr. Bain runs down Queen Street, and it ends approximately down here. Witness C is in a vehicle approximately here on Orange Street, and witness D, which actually you'll hear from more than anybody else, is actually sitting on, civilian witness C, is sitting on Queen Street in the road and has a direct view into the fatal shot, what's taking place in the alcove of Place Marie, which results in the death of Mr. Bain. He is essentially right behind the police officer and has a completely unobstructed view and is only a few feet away. There's a witness E who is a pedestrian on the west side of Queen Street over here, and then stays on that side and crosses over at some point. But again, the critical witness would be, well, they're all important and they're all considered, but the really important one that we have, and I want to emphasize, in addition to the video evidence, in addition to the police, and it's unusual to have this, we have a civilian who is far away to you and some of the people in this room, who has an unobstructed view. His attention is gathered from the moment of Mr. Bain's flight and watches the police encountering. So that's a diagram just to orient you. You can put that down if you have any more questions with that. I'll take them. But I'm going to go through a synopsis of the facts at this point. And when I say synopsis, I mean that. It's like there's an exhaustive report, there are report after report. I'm not going to read for you every single fact and every single statement from every single witness. I'm put together the comments that I think are most relevant for my determination. Obviously, some things will not be in the facts, but I'll take any questions that you have on them. So, first of all, Gregory Bain, who's a 35-year-old male.
Mr. Steadman, are you?
No, I'm not taking anything at this point in time. I'm going to do my statement. There'll be time for questions from the media at the end. Mr. Bain's 35-year-old male, approximately 6'3", 220 pounds. I asked if he was known to the police officers involved, and I'll identify those police officers that are involved at this point in time. Officer Jose De La Torre, Officer Dave Kaminsky, first name? David Kaminsky, and Officer Andrew Nauman are the three police officers that you're going to hear of for the most part. Officer Jose De La Torre is the first to respond. Officer Kaminsky backs him up, and Officer Nauman responds after a pursuit has already begun. Mr. Bain was known to Officer Nauman, but neither Officer De La Torre or Kaminsky recognized or knew Bain from prior police encounters. And there were some scattered encounters over the years. The last most significant charge was, I guess, in 2008. So I'll go into the synopsis at this point in time. On Monday, June the 10th, Operator A from the Lancaster Community Safety Coalition, while operating and monitoring the cameras at the coalition, took notice of an individual that walked into the southeast corner of Lancaster Square, located in the 100 block of North Queen Street. The subject, identified as Gregory Bain, walked into camera view under an overhang located in the square. He was pushing a cart that contained several bags and a suitcase. He was observed by Operator A to walk to a concrete pillar, undo his pants, and urinate in public against the pillar. This prompted the operator to call Lancaster Countywide Communications to report the incident, to have an officer respond to the area to address the quality of life issue. Approximately 6:59 in the morning, made the call, and they dispatched the incident as an indecent exposure to Officer Jose De La Torre. De La Torre was provided with a description and a location, and that he was observed urinating in public by the coalition video. Officer David Kaminsky and Officer Andrew Nauman transmitted on the radio that they were en route to assist, and they were not together. Officer Delatorre arrived first, followed shortly by Officer Kaminsky. Officer Naumann was in traffic in a vehicle on his way, but not far away. Officer Delatorre made initial contact with Bain, asking for identification and advising him that his behavior would not be tolerated in this area. Specifically, Officer Delatorre said hello to Bain and asked him, "What are you doing pissing out here?" Bain denied that he had urinated. Officer Delatorre told him that there were cameras all over the place, and that Bain said to him, "Well, I had to go." Officer Delatorre told Bain that it's not tolerated here and he needed to find a bathroom. I would note that there is a porta potty open for public use, and there was at that time about 100 yards away, simply across the street, across Queen Street. Bain then started talking of what the officers described as somewhat bizarre ramblings. Officer Delatorre asked Bain for his identification, and Bain eventually removed his wallet and handed his identification to Delatorre. The suspect continued to talk to himself, and Officer Delatorre turned to Kaminsky and said a code word, and Kaminsky agreed. The code terminology that they used is used to identify somebody who's mentally disturbed. The officers did not physically contact Bain and instead remained a substantial distance away, and no weapons were drawn. Bain, however, stepped towards Officer Delatorre twice, and both times Officer Delatorre had to tell him to step back, and you'll see that on the video. Civilian witness B heard the conversation and described the police as trying to be cordial with Bain. Officer Kaminsky stood in a cover position, and without warning, Bain removed a knife from his left pants pocket and attacked Officer Jose Delatorre. If you could show them the knife at this point in time. It's 9 inches in length, it has a 4-inch blade and a 1-inch width. This is obviously not a table butter knife, and an extremely dangerous weapon. Officer Kaminsky closed the distance to Bain to assist Delatorre. Delatorre backed up and began to draw his weapon. Bain then turned his attention towards Officer Kaminsky and made slashing movements with that knife as he closed distance on Kaminsky. Meanwhile, Officer Delatorre gave commands to Bain, and Officer Delatorre gave commands to Bain, drew his department-issued weapon, and fired a single round, which missed. Kaminsky drew his weapon but did not fire, considering the potential danger to civilians. Because, as you'll see, Officer Delatorre is facing towards the building. Officer Kaminsky, at this point in time, would have been facing out towards traffic. For him to fire, had he missed, it's certainly a danger to the public. Bain then began to flee. He ran south on Queen Street to the east side with Officer Delatorre and Kaminsky in foot pursuit. The officers gave him numerous commands for him to stop, all of which were ignored. And I can't repeat this enough. Throughout the entire incident, and this is corroborated by the civilian witnesses as well, the police officers continually give him verbal commands, all of which are ignored. The verbal commands are stop, drop the knife, get down on the ground. Over and over they say this to him, and no one has account of it, but it's all corroborated by the civilian witnesses. Civilian witness confirmed that the police yelled at Bain numerous times to stop. I'm sorry. He actually ran into traffic, causing some vehicles to stop. Then they're giving them the verbal commands. Bain retained the knife while running. Officers radioed they were in foot pursuit. This caused Officer Naumann to activate his emergency lights and pull west into the intersection of Orange and Queen Streets in the direction of travel. Officer Naumann joins the foot pursuit, and essentially what happens at this point in time is he's coming down Orange Street. He essentially cuts off Bain's pursuit. Bain almost runs into the vehicle and runs around it and continues his flight. Officer Naumann is closing in on Bain as well as calling to him. He knows him, so he's calling him by name. But the other officers tell him that Bain has a knife, and at the same time, Bain turned to face Officer Naumann and brandished the knife towards him. At that point, Officer Naumann appropriately backed off slightly and continued to tell him to stop repeatedly. All the commands were ignored. During the foot pursuit, Officer Kaminsky deployed and fired a taser X-26 in an effort to stop Bain's flight. Although he was hit by the taser was ineffective, and civilian witness C, who was in the vehicle, saw Bain actually pull out a prong which had struck him. Civilian witness D, also in his vehicle, stated that during the chase, Bain stopped in front of his car and turned towards the police with a knife, and his direct quote from him was almost like he was taunting them, taunting the police. Witness D stated he heard the police telling Bain to drop the knife while he was in front of his vehicle on the east side of Queen Street. Bain, however, continued to run until he crossed Queen Street to the west and stops in front of Place Marie at 52 North Queen Street. And I want to point out that, with this, it's an alcove area, and I'll make all these photos available for if you want to see them. But it's not just a straight front with the building. There's an alcove, and you'll see in one of the videos that there's a time where you'll see Bain's feet disappear, and that's because he's going back into the alcove, which the camera cannot see. So when he's basically cornered in that location, Bain turns to face the officers who had essentially cut him off. The entrance to Place Marie was closed at the time and cannot be seen by any video, as I mentioned. Bain initially squared off to face Nauman, who was between the other two officers. So Officer Nauman is in the middle, directly facing Bain. Officer Jose De La Torre is to his right, and Officer Kaminsky is to his left, and Bain's in front. Bain then moved back into the alcove of the entrance, still facing the officer and still holding the knife. At this time, all three officers repeatedly commanded Bain to drop the knife, which he still held in his right hand. Witness D stated that the police told Bain to drop the knife or they were going to tase him. Witness C heard the police yelling at Bain to get down on the ground. Civilian witness E, who was down the street, also confirmed that the police gave numerous verbal commands to stop and get down on the ground, all of which were ignored. Bain instead again took an offensive posture, which caused Officer Kaminsky to deploy a second cartridge from his taser. The taser missed. It should be noted that only Kaminsky had a taser of the three officers on his person, and that was his last cartridge. So he has two cartridges of taser. He had fired and hit once. Mr. Bain had pulled that out of his body, it had no effect, and then he missed at this occasion. The officers were now approximately 10 feet from Bain. Witness C, whose view was now somewhat obstructed by a tree, remember he's looking sort of down the street and across, stated the officers were at this point loudly yelling at Bain to get down on the ground in terms that were as plain as day, and that's a direct quote from that witness. Bain then locked eyes with Officer Nauman and advanced directly towards him with the knife. Officer De La Torre fired one shot from his duty weapon, which missed and did not stop Bain from continuing his advance. Nauman was still giving commands to Bain and believed he was about to be attacked as he's coming towards Nauman when De La Torre fired the second shot about 1 second after the first, striking Bain once in the lower abdomen and causing him to fall to the ground. Witness D described it and stated there was an officer on either side of Bain, and he lunged at the officer in the middle, and the police shot him. Witness D specifically stated he did not think the police did anything wrong and acted inappropriately. He stated that they yelled at him, they tried to taser, and he had plenty of time to drop the knife. It should be noted that Witness D, as I said before, had the direct, unobstructed view of the confrontation at Place Marie. And I'm actually going to read you a little bit of the more detailed statements from Witness D, the civilian witness who's there. The question is, what happened then when he was running on the sidewalk? Answer: he paused and turned and looked back in the direction he came from. The next thing I seen was there were two cops chasing him at that time. He came diagonally across the street, stopped right in front of my car, and looked back at the police, almost like he was taunting them. I figured it's no use for me jumping out on him. A third cop appeared to come up from my left rear in a bike cop suit. I assume he was on a bike or a bike cop. The guy ran up on the sidewalk and on the left side and stopped, and he had a knife in his hand, and they were hollering at him to put the knife down or they were going to tase him. I think they did tase him 2 times. What hand did he have the knife in? His right hand. What did the knife look like? And he describes the knife as a dark-handled black. It was big, could be seen sticking out the front and back of his hand. Where did you see them tase him? And he describes the alcove. There's an alcove in the back. Were you able to hear the police, was the question. Answer: yes, they were telling him to drop the knife or they were going to tase him. I really don't think tasing him affected him at all. This all happened in what appeared to be milliseconds. When did you first hear the police yelling at him to stop and drop the knife? Answer: they were hollering at him when he was running down the sidewalk, and I don't know what they said. They did holler at him to drop the knife when he was in front of my car, and at the same time when he was on the other side after he crossed my car. In other words, that's at Place Marie. What happened after the tasing didn't seem to be effective? Answer: he lunged at one cop, and the cop was standing in front of the guy with the knife, and the cop shot him. There was a cop on either side of him, and he lunged at the cop in the middle. And he specifically, he notes, unsolicited, I don't think the police did anything wrong. Question, did you think this guy was going to stab the officers if they did not react? Answer, he would have, yes. Question, did you hear this guy say anything during the encounter with the officers? Answer, not really, other than when they had him down, asking him if he was all right. This is after he shot. He said, hell no, you just shot me. Question, as a citizen driving through the city and essentially have an up-close and personal view of this event, do you feel the police acted appropriately? Answer, yes. Question, was there anything to make you think that the police could have used other means? Answer, no, because they yelled at him, they tried tasers, and he had plenty of time in all of that to drop the knife. He lunged at them with the knife, and only then they shot him. After he was down, the knife was kicked by Officer Kaminsky from his hand. He didn't drop it, it was kicked from him a few feet away. Bain was then taken into custody. After some additional resistance, he wouldn't bring his hands out. And unbeknownst to them at the time, in his right pocket, he actually had another edged weapon, which is here, more of a traditional box cutter thing. And I'll just on a side note, and you'll see the pictures of it, he had quite a collection of edged weapons in his possession. 2 on his person, the knife, the box cutter, and then I believe about 6 or more amongst his belongings, which he had. So he had a number of weapons. These are the 2 that are obviously the only ones that are relevant to this event. So the knife was kicked from him, he was taken into custody, medical help was summoned immediately, and he was transported to Lancaster General Hospital, where he died from the gunshot wound. He died from a single gunshot wound to the left side of his lower abdomen that traveled left to right, passing through his bowel and his iliac vein on the right side, causing massive blood loss. The bullet trajectory is consistent from where Officer Delatorre was standing, which was off to his left side. So it actually essentially goes in more towards at hip level and traveled slightly downward across him and hit what I understand is a major vein, the vein counterpart to the femoral artery, and that causes him to unfortunately bleed to death. They tried valiant efforts at the hospital. They gave him a lot of blood, but obviously he didn't make it. So the evidence that I looked at are 4 related videos, 3 of which I'll show today. One is Andy Nauman's car, and if you could bring that up again, it shows nothing, and the reason it shows nothing is Officer Nauman pulls his car down here on Orange Street. He pulls it across, parks it here, approximately on this corner. His camera's facing down Orange Street. The flight goes behind him and down here to Place Marie. So it shows there's nothing relevant on that, but you'll see the confirming of that in the other videos as well. The evidence, obviously, the firearms, the tasers, the knives that you've seen, the possessions that he had, photographs, and scene evidence.